Hello, I'm Mark Foster. In this video, I'm going to show you how to connect all the Pinewood Derby gear for your PAC 225 Pinewood Derby. So we're going to start with the timer right here, and then we got the server right here, and then optionally we can set up a kiosk right here. First, we're going to start with the Wi-Fi router. And to get this powered on, we have a plug-in adapter for it. Looks like this. So plug this into a power strip like that, and then we're just going to plug this into the back, and that's all the connections we need to this. Well, it's going to make an ad hoc Wi-Fi network called PAC 225 that we're going to use with the two timing computers. Next up, we're going to wire up the fast track timer. This is made by a company called MicroWizard. Their phone number is right here on the timer, and they're a pretty good company. The one time I've called them, somebody picked up the phone and answered all of my questions, so they've been great to work with so far. So at the beginning of the track, you're going to have this laser emitter, and then there's a receiver, a black box. And the emitter has this plug. We're going to plug this into a jack on the side of the black box here. And then the next thing we're going to do is hook up this cable. This runs all the way from the end of the track where the timer is going to be to the laser emitter and receiver at the front of the track. So I'm just going to here plug this in. Plugs in just like a phone cable, if you remember how to use those nowadays. And then if you just do that and then you plug in power to the fast track, the fast track will work all on its own. So next thing I'm going to do is plug in the power supply. So we got a wall wart here that we're going to plug in. All right, and if I press this black button, this kind of resets the timer. Now what you can do is test it out. So you got to make sure that this laser is aligned with the receiver on the black box. And if it is, if I cut the laser beam, you'll see the timer start going. And then if we pretend some cars are going down the track, I can interrupt each one of these and get times. So even without hooking it up to a computer, it'll give you times. If you really had to, you could just write down the times on a sheet of paper and keep track that way. But we're not going to do that because that's a lot of work. We're going to hook it up to a computer. So to do that, they provide a black serial cord. Looks like this, and that plugs in to the base of the timer here. And I'm going to screw it in to make sure it's nice and secure. And then over here, I'm going to plug it into my server. So I have the server labeled PAC 225 Pinewood Derby SVR server. And the way it connects to the server is using a serial to USB adapter cable. Now this one is a special one because it has little LED indicators that'll show us if there's activity on the serial port. And that can come in handy later when I get into troubleshooting. So for now, I'm going to connect this to this, and I'm going to screw these in to make sure it's nice and secure. At the other end of it is a common USB port. So I'm going to plug that into the back of this. This is basically just a small mini desktop computer refurbished from Amazon. Works great. And now we're done. The timer is now hooked up to the server, so now we just have to wire up the server. We'll do that next. To set up the server, you just simply need to plug in the power adapter, plug in the display port. This plugs into the monitor. Make sure when you pull this out, by the way, that you press this little tab down as you pull out to release the DisplayPort adapter when you take the server back apart again. I'm going to plug that in. And then I'm going to make sure I have a wireless mouse and keyboard. Make sure that the keyboard's turned on. There's an on switch right there. And then the same for the mouse. There's a on-off switch on the bottom of the mouse. The mouse and keyboard use a wireless dongle that's already plugged into the back of the server, so you shouldn't have to do anything with that. So now that everything's wired up to the server, we can go ahead and turn the server on. And let's see if we get something on the screen. If everything's working correctly, you should see the Lenovo splash screen. And then it's going to boot into Ubuntu 20 LTS, which is a pretty lightweight desktop operating system that we're using to run this. For the actual Pinewood Derby software, we're running DerbyNet, which is a great open source software package made by Jeff Piazza. Many thanks to him for putting it together. So now we have a login screen. Came up nice and fast. And we're going to go ahead and log in. And the first thing that'll happen when you log in is it's going to start trying to track down the timer. So I'm going to move this browser out of the way. And we see that the timer software found the Fast Track K-Series timer we're using, and it's all set. And so the next thing I'm going to do is tell it how to connect the timer software, how to connect to the server. And for that, where it says server URL, I'm just going to type in localhost because we're just connecting back to itself. And I'm going to hit connect. And that looks good. We got green OK here and a green OK here. Now I've set this up so that as soon as you boot the server, it's going to take you right to the server login screen. Now the way DerbyNet works is it's actually a web server running PHP under the hood. And so you're actually connecting to it through a web browser. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. And I'm going to be the race coordinator. The password's already saved. If you don't know the password, I'll put that in the documentation. And then we're going to go to we're going to pretend we've already done check-in, and we're going to go to the race dashboard. And as you can see, we're already in a heat. I've already scheduled a heat. Now I'm not going to get too much into the DerbyNet software because it's documented very well on their website. What I'm going to do here is zoom out, and I'm going to cut the beam, and then we're going to pretend our cars are racing. They're going down the track, and then the car cuts the beams. And then if we look up on the screen here, we'll see that we got times and right here, and then we have the next cars up for staging. All right, so let me do that again, zoomed in onto the timer, the screen here, so you can see that work again. So I'm gonna cut the beam for the next heat. I'm going to break the beams, like the car is all finished, and you see the times fill in. Now, if at some point during the race you stop receiving times because a cable gets disconnected or something, that's okay. Don't panic. I'm going to go ahead and pull this cable out. It's going to throw off the timer because it thinks that race has begun. I'm going to put it back in. Like we're gonna fix it now. This reset to all zeros. And then on my race dashboard, I can go and I can rerun a previous round. There's a button for that. You can't see it right now because I'm zoomed out. But I'm going to go ahead and pretend another heat has begun. And I'm going to cut the beams. And then it just picks up where it left off. The race software, DerbyNet, has recorded the times that just were taken. And everything should just keep working normally. Now for troubleshooting, if you have more difficulties with losing your times, what you can do is try reseating everything. So one of the issues I've seen is this little cable right here between the laser emitter and the receiver at the start line can cause problems. So try reseating this thing into the little black box. The other thing you might want to check is reseat this cable right here. Just unscrew it, put it back in again. This usually isn't too much of a problem. And if it is, one thing you can do is if you want to check this cable and make sure the whole thing's okay, I'm providing what's called a Loopback Tester. This is gonna short out pins 2 and 3 on this and create a loopback. And I'll show you what you can do to help test that. So I'm gonna plug this in here, like so. And one of the things I can do is on this USB to serial adapter, it's gonna show me if there's activity on the line. So it's gonna show me if my USB to serial adapter is working correctly. But the other thing I can do is I'm going to turn off the timer software for a second here. Close out of this. And I'm going to run a software called Qcom. So let me zoom in a little bit here so you can see this a little bit better. So what this software allows me to do is I can actually connect to the serial port directly. So I'm going to go into my settings and I'm going to set the baud rate to 9600. This is the baud rate that the fast track timer understands. Data bits 8, flow control none, parity none, stop bits 1. Great. And then what I can do, once that's all set up, I can pick the device. So I'm going to pick TTY USB 0 here and hit open. And you can see some of the previous commands I've been sending to it. So for now, I don't have the fast track timer connected. I just have that loopback device. So we're just going out through this USB to serial adapter. We're going over the black cable and into this loopback tester, which is just basically taking the transmitter pin and putting it into the receiver pin. And what this will do for us is it'll not only test that the black cable is okay, this black serial cable is all right, but it's also going to check our USB to serial adapter, this guy, and make sure it's functioning correctly. So if it is, I should be able to send a simple command like hello and have it repeated back. So all I did was type in hello and it repeated it back. Now, if I did not have the loopback connector on here, so if I unplug this thing like so, and I try to do the same thing again, type in hello and hit enter, I get nothing returned. And that's because it sent something out of the serial port pins and there's nothing connected, so nothing came back. What I effectively just did is verified that the cable's good, because as long as I have this loopback tester plugged in and I type in a command, that works. So let's say I've done all that and it looks like my USB adapter and my serial cable are working. What can I do next to kind of test things out? So I'm going to go ahead and plug the black port back into this black serial cable back into the serial port on the timer, like so. And then what I can do is I can actually use this terminal software to send a command to the timer software. So MicroWizard actually gives you a whole sheet of commands that you can type at it. We're just going to use the revision command so we can test and see if it's going to spit a return version of the firmware. To do that, I'm just going to type in RV and hit enter. And if the timer is working correctly and it received that message over the serial port, you should see it come back and give a copyright MicroWizard with the year and then the timer version. So that tells me this whole setup is working correctly and the computer is able to communicate with the timer and vice versa. So that's it. Hopefully you won't have to touch this at all and everything will just work. But if you do, now you know how to handle that. All right, so for this next part, what we're gonna do is set up an optional Kiosk Computer. Now the reason you might want to use this is if you want to project onto a screen at the end of the track so that everybody in the audience can easily see the scores. But also DerbyNet has a really cool feature where you can use a webcam connected to the Kiosk Computer to do an instant replay of the finish. What I'm going to do is hook up the Kiosk Computer. So I'm going to plug in the keyboard into a USB port. I'm going to do the same thing for the mouse. The Kiosk Computer also uses a DisplayPort adapter. Remember, when you pull this out, make sure you press down the tab. I'm going to plug that into the back, plug in the power, and then I'm going to plug in the webcam to one of the blue USB ports, USB 3 port. And then we'll turn it on. And if everything's working correctly, you should see the HP banner screen. And then you can either wait or just hit enter and it'll boot into Ubuntu. And then we can log in. There we have our desktop. Okay, once you're at a desktop, launch a Chromium browser and it should automatically connect to the server. Make sure that the server and this kiosk machine are both connected to the PAC225 network. The way you can check that is in the very upper right hand corner. You won't be able to see this very well, but it should say CubPAC225 for the Wi-Fi network. If it doesn't, click on select network and choose CubPAC225 for the network. And I will include the password for that in the notes. So I'm going to go ahead and log in, and I'm going to say be a kiosk, and I'm going to be the replay kiosk. And it'll say waiting for camera to connect. I'm not going to wait. I'm going to click on this link right here, click advance and proceed. And if everything's working correctly and you have webcam hooked up to the kiosk machine, you should see whatever the webcam's pointed at. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of line up the webcam a little bit better. There we go. And then click proceed and proceed again. I don't know why I have to click proceed twice, but you do. All right, now this is in kiosk identification mode. So it's basically just saying this is me on the server. So I'm going to go over to the server computer. All right, so now on the server, I'm going to open a new Chromium browser session and click on the Pinewood Derby race information link here, and then click on Kiosk Dashboard. And if everything's working correctly, you should see your kiosk come up, and it'll have like the kiosk number 58914 and the IP address. So I'm going to change the kiosk from being identify to now racing. Now the kiosk has a number of options, by the way. You can set up a kiosk to do any number of things. Like you can do a welcome screen, which is cool, and there's a place in there where you can put some new welcome graphics and so forth. If you're doing the Pledge of Allegiance, you can throw a flag up on the kiosk. So you see the US flag pop up there, which is cool. And then you can also switch to Now Racing. And that's the screen that's gonna show us our race results, and also, if everything's working correctly, our instant replays. So what I'm gonna do is zoom out so you can see everything. All right, so We're ready to continue our heats. We have our now racing screen up on the left. So I'm gonna brake the beam like our cars have started. Okay, our cars are going down the track. Hit, 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 finish, finish, finish. And then on the left-hand kiosk screen, you see a replay of what I just did. So if this were an actual race, you would see the cars running through the finish line. And it'll show it twice, and then after it shows the replay twice, which you can adjust, it'll show the results up on the screen. And then it shows that for a few seconds, and then it'll display the next racers that are up on deck. So one of the cool features of DerbyNet is that you can take a picture of each car on check-in with a webcam attached to the computer. So I have this running on the kiosk now. I connected to the server, I logged in as the race coordinator, and I chose racer check-in. So I'm going to say I'm checking in Frederick Cheney. That's checked in, and I'm going to take a picture of the car. So make sure the webcam is lined up and you have a decent background of some kind. And then I'm going to click on capture. And then if everything works correctly, you should see a little photo of the car show up next to the contestant's fake image there in this case. And then the other nice thing is that when you go to Now Racing on the kiosk later, when you're in the middle of the race, you'll actually get to see a picture of the car under the Now Racing. And this is also helpful for the person that's setting up the cars for each heat, because they can verify by looking at the picture they see on the projector screen that the cars they put on the track are in the correct order in the correct cars. And that's it.